Good afternoon. I'm Bill Holmes with the law firm of K&L Gates. We're the proud sponsor of the news desk here at the Storage Association 2019 conference. And with me this afternoon is Tom Leiden, who is the Senior Director of Distributed Solutions for EDF Renewables. And Tom, we've been chatting before our interview here, and I understand that you worked in the solar industry for some 25 years. So you've been to the vineyards, and I'm curious to find out what you think, what lessons you've learned in the solar industry and how that reflects on the storage industry.
That's a good question, but first of all, thanks for having me. I look forward to the discussion. And just so for some background, EDF Group, EDF is a global energy company. We have $79 billion in revenue last year. In North America, we focus on wind and solar and now energy storage. And you know, I've been in solar for almost 30 years now, and I've seen the ups and downs of the solar industry, but it's all about growth. And it's really about cost reduction more than anything else. And we see the same exact process going on in the energy storage business, where because costs have come down, mostly driven by electric vehicle batteries, because costs have come down, new applications open up, and then all of a sudden there's this whole new industry available to us. So very similar to solar in that way, and I expect the growth is going to be actually accelerated to what we saw in the solar industry, but same kind of amazing, hockey stick type growth.
Oh, that's great. Well, so let's look at a little narrower time frame. Where do you think we're going to be in the next, let's say, 3 years, 5 years, some sort of the near future, not too far away?
I do energy storage behind the meter for commercial and industrial customers. EDF also does in front of the meter utility scale energy storage. But so I think we're in the very early days of actually using batteries to be within our grid. And in the next 3 or 5 years, you're going to see a lot of growth, but because it's early stages, it's now all about getting some projects in the ground, getting investors comfortable with them, learning how batteries operate. And I say over the next 3 or 5 years, you're going to see this tremendous growth. I mean, some of the consultants that are looking at the markets figure there'll be a 14 times growth over the next 4 or 5 years.
That's remarkable. So when you think about things that get in the way of those opportunities for growth, what sort of obstacles are you encountering at EDF when you're trying to develop these energy storage projects behind the meter, or solar plus storage projects for that matter? I mean, what are the challenges?
Again, it's similar from solar. I mean, the number one challenge is cost. If you reduce the cost of batteries, there'll be new opportunities. But there are other issues with energy storage because we're connecting to the grid. You have to be able to basically synchronize with the grid. There are regulations that were built around central power plants, not distributed generation, like solar or wind, and now energy storage. So there are regulations that, for central power plants like nuclear or coal that don't really apply to energy storage, that it's distributed. So those regulations will change over the next 3 or 5 years as well to kind of open up the market. And then some incentives will come into play. The industry here at the conference is talking about the investment tax credit applying to energy storage. So if that would be a very powerful incentive for the storage industry, and just give a head start and a jump start actually on storage, just like we did in solar.
Now, and speaking of the investment tax credit, when you're looking at behind the meter storage, or even if you're considering front of the meter storage, how about pairing that with solar so you can combine that and take advantage of the ITC? Is that an area where you're seeing an opportunity front or behind the meter? Or?
Exactly. So right now, the biggest advantage of pairing solar with storage is you qualify for the investment tax credit of 30%, so it's significant. I mean, the storage industry is now advocating for an ITC separately from the solar, because right now you have to pair it with solar.
Yes. Yeah, they have to be well integrated. Well, that would be a big boon for the wind side of your business, probably.
It would. Yeah, it would.
So what do you see as the benefits of behind the meter storage versus utility scale storage? You're focused primarily on behind the meter.
I'm with the distributed solutions group of EDF, so we tend to work behind the meter or on smaller projects in front of the meter like municipal utilities. There are benefits of being on both sides of the meter. There are benefits to the grid to be in front of the meter and a grid supply where you could basically turn wind and solar projects into a dispatchable asset rather than the volatility of wind and solar. You could depend on the energy coming from the system. So that's of value to the grid, to the utilities. Behind the meter, there are other advantages because if power goes out, you could use the solar and storage system as a backup system. I live in New Jersey. We suffered through Hurricane Sandy. After that period, all the policymakers were out looking at how do we make the grid more resilient, and adding distributed generation, and particularly with storage, definitely makes it more resilient. And so that's kind of where it started over the last few years, and now it's just heading up.
And so it's a little bit of a resiliency opportunity.
There's resiliency, and then also being behind the meter, customers get charged demand charges, and we can predict when those peak demands come, and we can discharge a battery at that time. So as far as the utility sees, there's no spike in demand. So there's some value to this to the customer there as well.
Well, so how does EDF as a company looking at the opportunities in the market? And I know EDF has had a tremendous amount of experience developing renewable energy in the United States, and what are you taking those experiences and looking forward and considering all the obstacles? What sort of the company's planning and thinking, and how is it going to bring its experience to bear in this brave new world of ours?
Yeah, good question. In truth, EDF, because it's the French utility, is responsible for the French islands as well. And those islands are basically microgrids. So you have wind, you have solar, you have diesel gensets, and then energy storage. So we've been in energy storage for a while, doing those microgrids on the islands. And the other thing is nuclear power plants are backed up by battery systems.
Yes, interesting.
And so all of the nuclear plants that EDF owns and operates have backup. So that's kind of how we got our foot in the door. But at this point, it's a whole new market, and the company's very committed to it. We do a lot in North America. We do a lot of utility scale wind and solar projects. We're committing, like all the projects that we bid now will have energy storage with it.
That's great. So one of the questions that people think about a lot these days, as you can see from the news and reading about bomb cyclones and other remarkable weather events, is climate change.
Right.
And how does energy storage help address the challenge of climate change?
Well, the first thing is defense, right? So if you have resilient grid, then there's value there by having energy storage. So backup systems, as an example. We like to talk to municipalities that want to set up emergency centers in the case of other storms, other weather events, where they have solar and storage there as part of their backup. But on a bigger scale, in order to make the grid more efficient, if you put a lot of batteries into the grid, then you don't have to fire up these either coal or natural gas plants to meet the peaks. There's a lot of standby power.
Clean peak.
Clean peaks,
yeah.
Right. There's a lot of standby power now, mostly gas peakers right now, that just stand by for maybe 25-30% of the time when there are peak demands on the grid. With energy storage, you can move energy from the cheap part of the day to those high demand parts of the day, and so you won't have to fire up the gas peakers. So there is really the biggest benefit environmentally.
Okay, well Tom, I think we've just about reached the end of our time here. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Bill.
Great to talk with you, and thank you everyone.